day for Patterson. Nobody open. Still looking. Shea Patterson on the run for the end zone. Fingertip grab and a touchdown by Oliver Martin.
I can't wait for Mike.
Here we go. Looking for the lead. Cornelius behind and knocked away. And the two-point conversion fails.
Body.
Lead bursts through the hole, breaks a tackle across midfield, gets a nice block down the field, and scores a touchdown.
Nice little fake. He's heading for the pylon. Another stutter step. Leaps. Fear the stash.
It's a little mustache.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Those sweet, sweet sounds mean we're hanging out. It's a college football playoff rankings reaction show. You know what? We're getting bigger and fancier because we're not just on Twitter tonight. We're on Twitter right now. But we're also going to add ESPN Radio to this whole thing. So they're actually going to put us on radio. Are you ready for that?
What could possibly go wrong? No delay, mass confusion. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, it's perfect. He's Mike Golic Jr. I'm Jason Fitz. Our special guest host this week, the incredible, amazing, awesome, wonderful, stupendous Elle Duncan.
Wow. Hi.
Hi, Elle.
Hey, what's up, you guys?
Good to see you again. Back for year 2 with us.
I was going to say, yeah, only this time I am not pregnant, so where are the shots?
Yeah, I would say, so
We don't do
we're
that?
drinking during the show this time.
Okay.
Can we admit,
don't
though,
do that?
last year when you were here was the first time I'd ever met Elle Duncan.
Yeah, it was.
Wow, really?
Real true story.
Oh,
and now
wow.
all these years later, look at us. We're Snapchat colleagues. We host a podcast together.
Yes, the ESPN Music Podcast, which you can get wherever you consume your podcasts. And you mentioned Snapchat. All three of us have had the opportunity to work on SportsCenter on Snapchat,
Yeah.
which turns a year old today also.
Yeah,
so
1-year-old.
congratulations.
Gratuitous self-promotion
It
all
really
the way
is.
around.
It's like
here.
right
We
off the
started
bat.
off
Let's just get it out of the
Thank
way.
you. By the way, also, Treavor Scales and I host the college football show Saturday. Okay,
Here we
too much.
go.
That was too much. It was too much. So the rankings are out, and if you're just tuning in and you're like, what in the heck am I watching? We do this every single Tuesday as Mike and I and a special guest host break down what the committee has told us, what we've learned, where things are going, and we get you a little bit of sort of all of that reaction looped into one. Like I said, tonight in just a few short moments, we'll be joined by ESPN Radio as part of the conversation. You guys can chime in. The hashtag is Rankings Reaction. So that's all you have to do, hashtag Rankings Reaction. The top 25 are out. The top 6 look exactly the same as they looked a week ago. Alabama at 1, Clemson at 2, Notre Dame at 3, Michigan at 4, Georgia at 5, and Oklahoma at 6. I couldn't find a creative way to sing any of the others. So that's where we are with the top 6, which will create some interesting conversation tonight because, in case you can't tell by the helmets that are behind us every week, Mike Golic Jr. has an affinity for Notre Dame that I still don't quite understand. And also on the other side, I'm joking.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm a little on edge this week. Like, it's Syracuse week. Basically, everyone at ESPN is employed. They're graduated from either Syracuse or Northwestern. So we already took down one of the Big J juggernauts, and we're going for number 2 this week. So I'm pretty dialed in at this point, Fitz. You're poking a bear.
Well, on the other side, though, I have Elle Duncan, who has Atlanta in her blood, Georgia in her bones. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. If the over and under was 3 minutes on the first UCF question, there we go.
Not UFC rankings?
Yeah, UFC, UCF, close enough. You know, little problem there. We'll get into UCF as the night goes on.
Are we going to talk UFC? Because if so, I'm going to go.
I
don't know what you've been doing.
So the top 6 out, no changes. We didn't expect any changes, right?
No, there was going to be none. This is a pretty chalky week. I think everyone in the top 10 held serve. Yep. Oklahoma was the only one that really was in jeopardy of anything happening. So it's kind of the same discussions we've been having, and we're getting to a weekend now where we've got the Citadels of the world getting ready to go lob up a couple of. Oh, is that who Georgia's got this weekend?
UMass, dude.
Zoomass.
Yeah.
I don't want to. This is what they call a professional tease. There is one team in the top 10 that even if they win out and they do everything right, by the way they've looked so far this year, I don't think belongs in the playoff. I'll tell you who that is later on in the show.
Oh, I was about to just take a wild guess.
Well, I mean, you can if you want.
Wazoo?
Nope. See? Okay. Building the suspense. Wow. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, L. Duncan. Top 6 looked the way that we expected them. We've got some projection for bowl games. All looks interesting. My question to you guys, before radio joins us in just a minute, Nick Saban today got a little feisty about the fact that somebody asked if Tua should sit against the Citadel. Would you sit Tua against the Citadel?
Is that a joke? Absolutely. Why would you not? Why would you play him? What is you? He's not going to miss me with the Heisman conversation because he's not going to make or break any Heisman candidacy with how he fares against Citadel. It's an absolute joke.
Yeah, and to that end, Doug Kazarian told us on Saturday on the college football show, Treavor Scales and I host every Saturday on Twitter from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Doug Kazarian told us that they've actually taken the betting lines off for the Heisman.
Wow.
Vegas is so sure that it belongs to Tua, they're not even taking bets on it.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the way it should be. The only thing, like every discussion we're going to have tonight about what can happen in college football is predicated on the idea that unless something like an injury happens to Alabama, we're all kind of assuming they're going to win it. It's been that kind of year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why would you give an opening for the one bad thing that can happen to your team to happen other than Nick Saban knows this is his way and he believes and is going to do what he believes is right over any sort of conventional advice or wisdom?
Well, and to me, the one thing that separates Clemson from Alabama in the minds of many is the fact that Trevor Lawrence has had some injury issues. He hasn't protected himself well from taking hits, and they have no backup quarterback. Now you're looking at Bama. You've got
Same situation.
Exact same situation, and especially not knowing Jalen Hurts' health at this point.
Yeah,
So,
who was in a walking boot last game. And the thing is that it wasn't just Alabama's last game. I mean, we've seen Tua kind of banged up all season long.
Oh, yeah.
And favoring his lower extremities all season long. I think it's a stupid move, but again, it's Nick Saban. So, you want to err on the side if he knows what he's talking about and he wouldn't put Tua out there in a situation that he didn't feel comfortable with. But, you got to believe that his third string guy is a 4-star recruit. So, why would you even risk putting Tua in?
And with this year, the change in the rule about redshirting where you get 4 games at any point in the season before you have to burn that redshirt, it allows for situations like this where you can throw a kid like that into a game late in the year if you need a spot, especially against a team like the Citadel.
Correct.
so this is where everything goes crazy. Check this out.
Uh-oh.
We are now joined on ESPN Radio as Spain and Fitz presents the College Football Show Rankings Reaction. We're simulcasting. This is basically big time. Mike Golic Jr. sitting next to me, Jason Fitz, and our special guest host this week, L. Duncan. So we are doing this is like the millennial version of Mike, what you do in the mornings. So you're usually on Golic and Wingo in the mornings, and you guys are on ESPN2 and ESPN News. We instead are simulcasting with Twitter. So if you're listening on radio, you can watch it on Twitter. And when radio goes to break, we will continue to do fun, awesome, crazy, amazing things on Twitter.
My head wants to explode right now trying to comprehend all of this at once. I mean, Elle, you're the mother of an almost 4-month-old,
Yeah.
and I have to imagine this sounds even somehow more complicated than what you're dealing with in a baby who cannot talk to you, who's trying to express thoughts.
Yeah,
and
you
feelings.
guys lost me at simulcast.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't. I knew
is-
we were going to be on Twitter. I mean, I did my hair and makeup so I could be seen. So cool radio, thanks and all. But find us on Twitter.
Check that
Okay,
Twitter
because
out.
it's a big deal just to take a shower at this point. So the fact I did my hair and makeup for you guys, you better watch.
Respect that.
What is my excuse? I had 3 people yesterday on campus tell me I should really take a shower. I don't have a kid, so I don't really have an excuse.
Someone said that to you?
Yeah, that's pretty
Mike Foss was one of them.
Wow.
Mike Foss, our esteemed leader over here in the kitchen. So the rankings are out. If you're listening on radio, we already gave you the 1 through 6. We'll do it again now for everybody. The 1 through 6 is the same as they were last week. Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Notre Dame 3, Michigan 4, Georgia 5, and then who am I missing at 6? Oklahoma. Thank you. Oklahoma at 6.
Oklahoma.
This is the surprise for many people in the top 10. LSU, a 2-loss LSU team, remains at number 7. Washington State is the Pac-12's biggest hope at number 8. West Virginia at 9. Ohio State at 10. Do you guys have any problem with the top 10 as they sit now?
No, nothing really changed this week, right? Again, unless you wanted to look at Oklahoma and
We have a
penalize-
full hour to fill here, Mike. Give me a problem.
You want to penalize them for a close game against an Oklahoma State team that we acknowledge has probably underperformed a bit relative to the talent on their offense this year? No, Probably not, because they still got Kyler Murray, and we still believe on their best day that means something potentially in this conversation.
Well, in Oklahoma, as much as we want to talk about whatever has happened for Oklahoma, it's the same conversation, L, that we had last week. Oklahoma is going to play West Virginia, and then they're going to play West Virginia again in the Big 12 championship game. So you're going to have the opportunity for the number 6 team in Oklahoma to get two quality wins before the end of the season.
Yeah, they're going to cannibalize themselves, but I think the question remains, and I get it, it's the Big 12, so it seems redundant at this point to just talk about how terrible their defense is, but it does matter how you win, right? It matters to the committee, and if we find ourselves in a situation where Oklahoma is a bubble team, giving up over 90 points in 2 games is incredible. Unless you won those games, but if it matters how you win, how is that less than impressive to the playoff committee when you think about who they'd have to actually play in the playoffs should they make it?
But so use that scenario moving forward, because we're rewarding Michigan, essentially at this point, number 4 in the country, for having an incredible defense and not having an offense that scares a lot of people. So when you look at those 2 teams, if I had to tell you, if you had to put an entire year's salary on Michigan versus Bama or Oklahoma versus Bama, who do you take?
Okay, well, neither, but Michigan.
Yeah, I guess it's.
I wouldn't take Michigan against Bama.
Michigan.
I would take Oklahoma.
I think I think because Kyler Murray to me is so singularly exciting, I feel like, all right, at least because against Bama, what did we find out versus LSU? Having a great defense, sure, that'll get you somewhere. It'll get you blanked on your home field if you don't have an offense that could back it up. And that's what I feel like we've been looking for out of Michigan the second half of the season. And offensively, their numbers are near the top of the country in almost everything.
Right.
But it's just when you look at it and say, all right, when you translate that to competition that's going to give you more speed, better skill across the board the way Alabama can at wide receiver, do we still think, and I'd say that defensively for what Michigan's offense is going to face, do we really think that unit still holds up in the same way?
You're listening to Spain and Fitz presenting the College Football Playoff Rankings Reaction Show. If you're listening on radio, we are hanging out on Twitter. Hashtag Rankings Reaction is the way to get involved. No matter where you're hanging out with us, hashtag Rankings Reaction is where to get involved. Can we just all agree, as someone has commented, and they're very right, Notre Dame should have been dropped a spot for those terrible unis. I mean, those were awful.
All right, listen, there were a lot of different golds in play right now, but nothing is going to be more controversial than Notre Dame's jerseys this week. Have you guys seen those?
No, I haven't seen
So
them
Notre
yet.
Dame.
I'm waiting for you to get me free stuff for that.
Notre Dame is playing Syracuse at Yankee
Right,
Stadium this
right.
weekend, and so paying homage to the Yankees, Notre Dame is wearing full pinstriped pants,
Oh, yikes.
jerseys with pinstriped shoulders,
Oh, no.
and helmets that are all blue with the Notre Dame logo in white with pinstripes
Oh,
through
God.
that.
See, what Mike's
Why?
leaving out here, though, is that we were working together this summer on Golic and Wingo when those came out, and he started openly shilling for them, and the SID, the person with the school that handles all that stuff, then messaged him while we're on air, and is like, don't worry, we'll get you hooked up. And so I'm sitting there hosting with him. I'm like, do I get some free Notre
Where's
Dame
the
swag?
hookup?
Answer, nothing. He
Yeah,
had
what
totally
are the perks
silenced
of being
me.
an alum? I mean, I wouldn't know. As a college dropout, I have no perks. So, what are the perks of being an alum? What do you
Apparently
get
not there- it's not anything for your co-host.
for touting Notre Dame on every single platform at ESPN?
Sometimes, they will allow a ticket or something when I go back.
Oh.
I'm allowed to be
The ticket
in
ferry finds its way to your house.
Yeah, it might occasionally find its way to the house. I could walk in the old facilities, maybe get a workout in the weight room,
Right.
Go in there unbothered. The kids don't even look at me and ask, "Who are you, old man, you small person?" Because now
Why are
I'm
you
grossly
here?
outsized by all these kids. So some of those things still pop up in there
Nice,
from
okay.
time to time.
Given the number of Notre Dame helmets I see in this room right now, we are hanging out for you listening on radio. We're in Mike Golic Jr.'s actual living room. That's where we do this every week. Given the number of helmets I see, if they hook you up with the new blue helmet, since it doesn't match the pattern of any of the gold ones you have, can I have it?
No, that one's going to go in the front hallway. I've already actually got a spot picked out for that one, though. Good job, though. Listen,
Such
I
a bachelor
appreciate
hat.
your effort and you wanting to be involved, but unfortunately, we're not going to do that. What I am in the market for, maybe, is trading that for some Georgia swag. I have gotten in the habit now, going around calling some games, trying to amass some other schools' gear, and L represents and is fond of a school that's got great color schemes that I'm a big fan of.
I'm all in on Georgia, but I legitimately, you guys, do everything but beg like a commenter on the corner for them to send me stuff, and they don't. So
see, well, we're gonna
I got no pull when it comes to Georgia. I just
Do you hear
bark
that,
into
Georgia?
the wind. I just bark at a brick wall.
ESPN star L.
Can you
Duncan
hook
is
me up,
looking
Georgia?
for some gear.
I'm from there.
Georgia.
All I'm saying is that these are the moments where we talk about our bias rankings every week. You know, I lived in Nashville for 20 years. I got a lot of love for Vandy. When I got this job, Vandy sent me a helmet. I got a Vandy helmet in my desk. I'm just saying, Vandy helmets are fire. They look good. Helmets.
This has gotten sad.
Just the helmets.
Adorable.
Okay, so you see on the screen.
I can't believe on the college football ranking show, a playoff ranking show,
yeah.
Vanderbilt got a mention.
You're welcome,
Yeah,
America.
Well done.
Whoever had that bet somewhere, just go cash that ticket now.
You just saw the rankings from Mike and I. We both echoed the same sentiment as the committee, where they stand today. The question is, do you guys think this is where it will stand by the end of the year? Because LSU finds themselves out of the conversation now, obviously, the last couple of weeks. So this top 4 could actually be this top 4. Do you think it will be this top 4?
I think it will. I think that Ohio State's been trending in a bad direction for a while. I think this is the most winnable game for Michigan in that series since Jim Harbaugh's been there. And I think if Michigan wins the Big Ten championship, has the best loss in the country, and they go in, they're going to be in pretty good shape.
Okay, we'll get Elle's thoughts on it in a second. The radio side is about to go to break.
Okay.
The Twitter side, not going anywhere. It's the Rankings Reaction Show on Spain and Fitz. Keep hanging out with us on radio and on Twitter. So, now we flip over to Twitter.
It never stops.
Again, hashtag Rankings Reaction. A bunch of you guys have been asking about Michigan. We'll get to that. First, we have to get to who's receding from the playoff picture. Again,
damn you all to hell.
Receding from the play. In case nobody catches it, who is receding with the eyeballs?
See, it's bad because not only am I balding in that picture, I'm
Yes.
also fat as hell. Like, that was New Orleans Mike,
Yeah.
who spent the offseason down there with the Saints and decided every weekend would be a good opportunity to sample some of the local cuisine.
Oh, yeah.
And about 15 pounds later, your boy showed up with that headshot.
Yeah, that guy was eating a lot of beignets.
Man.
Yeah.
You know what? I still like it. The beard was fire, too.
I am, from that moment, I am probably a full 60 pounds lighter now.
Wow.
So one Jason Fitz.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
One baby
Jason
Fitz.
Fitz.
Well, you're welcome. The point of the receding hairline is not just to laugh at you and to point out how grumpy you looked for such a jovial guy. It's also what fan base is going to be grumpy as they recede from the hair. And your mom now coming in reminding us that's just mean.
Yeah, thanks, Mom.
She's right. I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of it. I'm sorry. But I will take a school here, and I'm just going to go straight for it because they destroyed me on Twitter Saturday night. So why not continue feeding the fire here? Ohio State, I don't care if Ohio State wins out the rest of the way. They do not look like they belong in the college football playoff. If Ohio State wins out all the rest of the way, I'm not going to excuse the eye test and tell you that they're going to find a way into the playoff. I could see Oklahoma, who I think will win out. If Oklahoma wins out and Ohio State wins out, congratulations. Better luck next year, Buckeyes.
Yeah, I think too because there's kind of like we've already seen this last year with Ohio State. They get a pretty tough loss last year, an embarrassing loss that they shouldn't have had on the road, and it kept them out of the playoffs. And I think we could potentially see kind of the exact same thing this year in terms of them saying, "Listen, last year we kept you out for an embarrassing loss. You got beat by Purdue. Whether you run the table or not, you're not good enough to be in."
I think that's the interesting part is even if Ohio State wins, it's still something that's in doubt.
Absolutely.
Like that's this. I've said from the beginning, one loss Oklahoma if they go and beat West Virginia twice to end the year versus one loss Ohio State with a win over Michigan. Oklahoma's getting in there.
Right.
Well, and the reason Ohio State fans were frustrated with me on Saturday is because I think Saturday's game was hot garbage against Michigan State.
Oh, it was ugly.
And everybody wants to come in and say, you don't understand it, you have an SEC bias, whatever it is. Like, here's a remarkable thing, Twitter guy. Like, I cannot like your game.
Oh, Jason's
I cannot
busting out
like
his
your
guys.
team. I cannot like anything about what I saw. But it doesn't mean that I have a bias against a conference or for a conference.
Jason's favorite trope, by the way, is the imaginary guy.
Twitter guy.
Like, if you
It's
put
this one guy.
a setting and then follow it with guy, that is Jason's
Yeah, like
number
receding
one
hairline guy
creation.
over here that's like, get off my couch.
Honestly, that's small. That is very small of you to continue to poke fun at my hairline. By the way, you guys really want to poke the bear because this is the one that a lot of us think this weekend in college football. It's a weak schedule. So much so that the choices. I heard Reese Davis say this earlier. The fact that Notre Dame fans were like, man, I hope our quarterback's healthy for Syracuse. We can put our backup out against Florida State. What a bizarro world we live in.
Yeah.
But UCF is getting their due this week. Like UCF is playing Cincinnati. They're hosting them. College game day is going down there.
Yeah,
Cincinnati is
but-
going to win that game.
What?
Cincinnati's going to win that game.
Wow.
Wow, that is a woo.
I got an up.
Hot
I got a
take.
close. I mean, look. Let's put it this way. So UCF had Navy last weekend.
Right.
Back at Ohio State, and I was talking to Luke Fickell, who's the coach of Cincinnati now. I did the Bearcats game this last weekend against USF. Big AAC tilt. UC gets a win. And the one thing that we talked about was they had just come off facing Navy. And Ohio State did this study years ago because one of the games that Ohio State lost was after Navy. And there's this Navy hangover phenomenon that happens where the next game you're a little beat up. It's a different style of football. You've got to get yourself back into that mode, all these things. You combine that with the fact that Cincinnati's got a top 5 defense in college football this year, quietly, like while the rest of us weren't paying attention to the group of 5 teams. That Cincinnati team's going to beat UCF this weekend.
And thankfully, and then we can put all of this to bed. I mean, this has to stop. Did they make the top 10 this,
No,
this
they're
week?
number 11.
They're still sitting at number 11. It tells you plenty.
For you guys on Twitter, we're about to rejoin with radio. Welcome back to Spain and Fitz with a special college football playoff rankings reaction show. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, L. Duncan, our special guest host this week, as we are sitting in Mike Golic Jr.'s living room. You can see it on Twitter. You can hear it on ESPN Radio. When we go to break on radio, you really should just open up Twitter, find it on the ESPN handle or the ESPN College Football handle, because Mike just said something huge about this weekend's game, and I just told you a team in the top 10 that doesn't belong in the playoff conversation. But before we get to any of that, Mike, we've gone from chubby receding hairline Mike to confident pointing football Mike. What is your confidence level in Notre Dame right now?
First off, the radio audience cannot see this. My new headshots,
So
I
good.
am hot.
It's really good.
Yeah, like they're great headshots, but we do my Notre Dame conference meter every week, and it is my cup runneth over. And I am at this point taking on all challengers. Like I mentioned this before, we work at a place in ESPN that employs a lot of Syracuse and Northwestern creds because they have great journalism schools. And so I got a lot of people that all of a sudden seem to be repping Syracuse football a little harder than they had in the past.
Nowhere.
And I just want to remind them who really does this. Like, you're showing up to the party late. We've been here kicking down doors. So you guys can feel good about being ranked 13th or whatever the hell you are right now. That's going to end very quickly this weekend.
And they always feel good whenever they are facing Crimson, right? Like anytime they play Crimson,
Yeah, that
that's
is true,
swag.
yeah.
That swag's on a million.
Yeah,
That
that
swag
game
is
they
on-
roll in.
on
Yeah.
what- Let me ask you this, though, as someone from Notre Dame, because this was a conversation we had quite a bit on Sunday and then again on Monday. I mean, I know Brian Kelly said it in jest, right? Like a quarterback controversy, but based on what you saw from Wimbush, would you incorporate moving forward over the next few games just to see some kind of offense where you get them both involved? Or do you want to just go back to book and let things be?
I think I'd go back to book, but I'd go back to Ian with a confidence in what you've got in the backup in a way that people were probably unsure of. I mean, Brandon has played a lot of football in the past. Brandon Wimbush, who's Notre Dame's backup quarterback, started for them all last season until the last couple of games, especially after what happened at Miami. What he did against Florida State outside of a couple of turnovers, to me, was really encouraging. Put the ball in really manageable spots. Operated the offense the same way that Ian really did. So I don't think, because Ian has a very similar skill set, not as gifted a runner, but still mobile enough to run your offense. So I think you've just got the added insurance of maybe, and Paul Feinbaum said this morning, not me, said Notre Dame probably the best quarterback situation in the country right now.
So if you want
Wait,
to chime
what?
in on the conversation.
What?
Yeah.
Over Bama?
Well,
Because
Bama
Jalen
considering
Hurts
the
is hurt.
considering the
Okay,
injury. Like
okay.
if you've got two healthy guys
Sure.
right now,
I'm trying to do a reset here,
I'm
people.
sorry.
All right?
no one cares.
Schematics, hashtag rankings reaction to get involved in the conversation on Twitter. You can find us on the ESPN handle, also on the ESPN College Football handle. The tweet is out there. If you're listening on radio, Spain and Fitz, we are doing the College Football Playoff Rankings reaction show. Mike Golic Jr., I'm Jason Fitz, our special guest host, L. Duncan, hanging out with us. And a lot of conversation about the top 6, which looked the same as last week's top 6. There's a comment that we get all the time on this, and we're seeing your Twitter comments, and a comment came in a little bit ago saying, of course Oklahoma's going to get in because this is a TV show before it's a playoff. Conspiracy! Do you guys believe that the playoff committee sits there and says, hey, what is going to create the best ratings, and who should we put in for that purpose? Elle?
No. So I had an opportunity, and I'm pretty sure you guys have had the same opportunity to go down and hang out with the mock playoff committee. Is this where Foss doesn't like this?
No. We mention it. We
It is
mention
like
it
a
as
running
often as
joke
possible.
every week
Yeah.
that we all mention
So
the fact
I had
that
an opportunity to hang out with a fake committee of fake peers, and no, and
Down in Dallas.
so it was interesting. I'm not going to say that because I went to Dallas and had a fake, playoff committee with a bunch of my colleagues, but I'll say this. What I found interesting was that for all of us talking heads that sat there and broke down like the 2010 or 11 year or whatever it is, they give you a year and you make it up, just to see the conversations that were happening among us, right? Like people who have no dog in this fight. We're completely fabricating storylines, but I kept noticing things that were coming up, and none of those things that were coming up were who's going to give the best ratings. I just don't find that to be the case. And
don't we all feel like to that point, Elle, like realistically, you put anybody in, if you put UCF in, the rating's going to be through the roof because everybody finally wants to see what UCF looks like. If the committee only cared about ratings, they'd find a West Coast team, a Southern team, a Big Ten team, and they just stack it that way. They've never done that.
Elle's point, I think, is the most appropriate one. Is I came away from that exercise saying, man, I saw how much a bunch of us who weren't going to affect the lives of any kids with our decisions cared about getting that right in that room.
I mean, we were yelling at each other. Yeah. Like there was like yelling and legitimate anger and vitriol and let's go back and rehash this point over and over and over until we come to a common decision and a common ground. So, but again, not one time in any of those conversations was it, well, let's just admit that the SEC is a ratings juggernaut, so let's put SEC schools in there. I just don't see that.
It's convenient and easy for college football fans to decide that whoever they're rooting for, there's a bias against than just saying, hey, maybe they're not as good as. And as much as an Oklahoma fan, for example, if Oklahoma's left out of the playoff, if they win out, they're left out of the playoff. Oklahoma fan is going to feel like there's some bias. If Michigan fan wins out and they're left out, they're going to feel like it's a bias. It's easier to say there's a bias than there is to just say, hey, either of these decisions could be good, and I can see the logic in both of them.
Well, or to admit that your team's got flaws that they're going to be punished for. Like, part of what we want to do in all this, the committee, is reward what we see. Like, people felt the BCS computers didn't take into account the actual football that was being played. And so part of this is, look and say, all right, I see what this team does really well. I also understand who they're doing it against. So a lot of people look at the schedules that are being played or what you go through and judge according to that. People look at Alabama and just how dominant they are despite how weak their schedule has been at certain points and say, all right, I know that's a good football team still. Like, those are things that I can very clearly see each and every week. And accounting for that, I think, is just as important. And, Al, I'm sure you saw it in that room when you're dealing with former coaches or former players. Those conversations end up being really as impactful because there are some people that aren't. Like, I know football. I know what I'm watching, and I'm not going to compromise that.
And I think that, listen, you can say what you want about the committee's decision last year. A lot of people upset that Alabama, made it in despite the fact that they didn't even play in their conference championship and this and that. But I think that Alabama proved again that, like, what everybody knew at the time and why the committee put them in the playoffs is that they were still the best team despite the fact that they got beat by Auburn. And that one game is what kept them out of their conference championship. They were still, and they ran the table. So now I think that obviously Georgia had a really good shot last year. I don't think anybody has a good shot this year. Although I will say, not to jump on the bandwagon, the Clemson bandwagon too tough, because I still think there's a huge difference between 1 and 2. But I'd say that gap is a little bit closer than maybe we thought just a few weeks ago. Like, I see Clemson-Bama being a better game than I anticipated a few weeks back.
When you look at it, and I had a lot of time to kill in an airport one day, and I heard a lot of people starting that conversation that this Clemson gap, I think it might have actually been our former colleague Danny Cannell, who was a Florida State alum and certainly is familiar with the ACC, saying this conversation, Clemson is closer to Alabama than people are giving them credit for. So I went and looked, and whether you break it down with strength of schedule they've played, remaining strength of schedule, offensive yards, all these things, the margins are very thin as far as the difference of the competition that they've faced, the amount of production that they've had. Clemson certainly defensively maxes them out in a few areas where Alabama also outpaces them a bit on offense because they've got a quarterback who's going through some of those freshman kind of growing pains.
Exactly.
But I guess that's the point is, you know what, that is probably a lot closer than people think, and it's unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, like it looks like all roads at this point, if you were going to handicap it, point to Clemson.
What's
and Bama.
wrong with that? This whole idea that like no one wants to see Clemson-Bama Part 2. I love. Listen, I'm all in on trios, right? The Trinity. I want to see 3, especially if one team has won and one team has won the following year. To me, this would be a fantastic way to kind of in this rivalry. They both won a national championship against each other. I'd love to see what happens in round 3. I'm not against it at all. I don't understand why people are so angry at this potential matchup.
We could get part 4, by the way, because when you look, Trevor Lawrence and Tua are both going to be back.
Are both
Yeah,
true.
100%.
Yeah.
That's the other part of the conversation. You guys can chime in, #rankings reaction. Tim Dwyer had a question. First time, long time starts this question. Does Kansas have a shot? Please respond. I'll hang up and listen.
Dwyer.
We only said that, Dwyer, because we love you.
Love you, Dwyer.
But no, the comment coming out there, and we've seen several of these. Quick, Mike, this comment, if LSU is passing the eye test, the committee better get their eyes checked. Do you have a problem with the 2-loss LSU team being at 7?
No, because LSU, when you look at it, and this is the fascinating thing that I don't know if we really have a handle on, is how the committee rates who you beat and what they were when you beat them. Because LSU coming into the season had a bunch of impressive wins on this that now look less impressive in retrospect.
Correct.
We're going to continue to get your thoughts on it. I also want to get your thoughts on how puckered you up are this weekend about watching your team play in New York. We're going to find out about it. We'll do that on the radio side after the break. Hit us on Twitter. We're going to still be doing great stuff there while we're gone. All right, so now we are back on Twitter here exclusively as we juggle the mediums.
I just love how in all of this, like we're doing a radio show and a Twitter show at the same time, and we take these gaps for it to transition. And for the people watching, nothing happens. Like we don't have any sort of like fun thing that happens physically.
Nope.
It's just like our brains switch.
We're just kind of sitting there,
We look
staring
dumb.
at
Well,
each other.
if you're just tuning in to this awesomeness, this is actually Mike Golic Jr.'s living room. These are his actual helmets. That is an actually mostly naked picture of his dad behind us, as is on set every single week. And L. Duncan is here, Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz. Mike and I are here every single Tuesday breaking down what the committee's told us, what it means moving forward. And we want to have a little fun. We like to admit our bias. We've been talking a lot how people think everything is about bias. So this break, we're gonna reveal our bias rankings. Mike, your bias power rankings. You want to explain yourself here?
Obviously, got Syracuse on the outs right now. They're publicly enemy number 1 this week. Any Syracuse alum, any Syracuse person that works for us is going to owe me money by the end of the week. UCF not far behind them. So I've got UCF and Cincinnati obviously above them. I'm telling you, this Bearcats team was really interesting to take a closer look at. Their defense has been playing well, statistically been one of the best in college football all year, and you cannot understate UCF coming off a game against Navy and what usually happens to team after those kind of games. And then, of course, on the other end of things, Notre Dame feeling pretty like it's been a fight for me to really buy into this year's Notre Dame team because I have been a part of so many underwhelming Notre Dame teams in the past that have stolen the dreams of our fan bases. This year's team is different. I think they're a more well-rounded team than what we dealt with, and I think they're going to run the table and get themselves in.
Do you have a reaction to any of his bias, El?
No, I was laughing because we do this thing on our show, me and Matt Barry on our show on Saturday called Sign Off, right? And Marty Smith was hanging out on the USS Carl Vinson, so he was hanging out with Navy, and they were, getting ready to do their game with UCF. So they had a sign that they wanted to participate in Sign Off. We were quite excited. And I loved what Navy said, mostly because it was something that we can't say because UCF fans are so angry. I've never in my life, I have Big Blue Nation's up there too. But use it y'all relax.
Big ups, big
you
ups.
gotta chill. You gotta chill, BBN. But his sign was UCF. Your championship is fake. It was fantastic.
That is amazing. We can't say that?
It was
you can't say that
great.
because you're a professional.
Yeah, I have to be a journalist.
Yes.
And I have to have an unbiased opinion. So I'm all in on I have mad UCF bias just because y'all need to relax. You play Maine.
Wow. Okay. So let me get you my bias rankings. I did some too. I don't even remember what are on them, but we'll see where I fall in the bias power rankings.
UCF's on everybody's.
These, you know what?
We're so over. Oh wow.
Yeah. Okay. So these are all things I'm biased against. UCF, your championship is fake. Get over it. Just be happy that you win games against nobody opponents. Wow. Ohio State, you don't belong in the playoff because you look like trash. I don't care if it's East Lansing. I don't care if it's 30 degrees. At the end of the day, it was a terrible offense you played against, and you still looked bad doing it. I cannot stand this whole argument that rivalry suddenly allows poor play. I'm biased against Notre Dame this week because I want some of that sweet, sweet swag, and the only way I'm going to get it is if Golic watches the Irish get decimated, and then he doesn't want the pinstripes around him, so he gives it all to me. And I'm here to tell you, for anybody that says I have a bias against anything, the thing I'm most biased against this week is the SEC East, because y'all stink. I'm sorry. Okay, Georgia's had an okay year. Fine. I'll give you Georgia. But the rest of it, Kentucky, come on. Kentucky losing to Vandy.
When are they ever good, Fitz?
Kentucky this was the year.
No.
Who else is good in the East? Who else is good in the East?
But why are you trying to throw the whole SEC East in there? Why
because
can't
Georgia's going to get beat by 35 to Bama. When Georgia
you,
plays a real football team, they're going to get beat by 35.
Who did you want in the SEC East to be good this year? Who did you think was going to be good?
Kentucky was good. Kentucky, according to the committee, Kentucky's the top 15 team, according to the committee.
Kentucky was average, and then they played someone that was actually good, and then they got steamrolled.
Kentucky's
and then they played
the top
someone
15
terrible.
team, according to last week, the committee told us Kentucky was better than UCF.
Okay, but you believe that? Are you joking? I mean, like, are you seriously? Are you kidding?
No. But what
it's
I'm
not
saying
basketball.
is that, what
You
I'm saying
believe
is that
that?
after years of a narrative that the SEC East was on the up and that things were coming around, and you know what, the quarterback play is going to get better, and things look good. Drew Lock is suddenly going to take a big step forward. No,
Look
the
how
SEC East
devastated
is
he
just
is.
oh, it's
But wait
just
a minute,
bad.
can we go back to Fitz's bias chart because you have Vanderbilt on there?
I'm
What
biased
are
for
you
Vandy.
talking about?
Because you know what, nobody can hate on Vandy. They're so bad.
I mean,
it's tragic.
they're the
technically
curve.
You just did because they're in the SEC.
I was gonna say they're the curve, dude. They're the reason the SEC East is trash.
No.
Teams like them.
No. The SEC
Yes.
East as a whole is trash. Vanderbilt is always trash, so it's good. They got I got a
So
helmet.
is everybody else lately.
You know what?
You know what?
Maybe if the rest of the SEC East sent me a helmet, they'd make it up the way on that list too.
See, this is what we kind of realize about every conference is every conference and every division kind of has one or two teams that, if they're lucky, are good and buoy it, and then everyone else kind of falls into the same.
And that's
like
fine if we want to have that conversation about all of them then, because for everybody that says the Big 12 can't play defense, that's a fair conversation.
They can't.
The SEC East can't play offense.
Well, I mean, pick your poison in the SEC West too, because LSU, who's the 7th ranked team in the playoff committee's rankings, number 2 in the SEC West, like their offense has looked anemic for parts of this year and can't get it done. Texas A&M has a better offense than LSU, but their defense doesn't match up in that same way. Auburn's been a huge disappointment for the majority of this season. Mississippi State's got a quarterback that's a great runner but can't throw the ball worth a damn, and an all-world defense. Like you've got to. College football is a world where there are a couple of teams with balance and then a bunch of teams that do one thing well.
Period.
Which I absolutely love. We're about to go back to radio here for everybody on Twitter. We're going to welcome back in. If you guys are hanging out with us on radio, Spain and Fitz doing the special this time. We are simulcasting the College Football Playoff Rankings reaction. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, L. Duncan in the house with us. And we're going all hour on everything we've seen from college football. And Mike, you were just making a great point that we were having a conversation during the break, and I'm willing to say that most conferences across the landscape of college football this year are not good. There are some good teams in every conference, but we are not in a world that we were in even 5 years ago, where you could sit here and look. My conference is better than your conference. Is the grown-up version of my dad can beat up your dad. There's no way to prove it.
Sure.
But some conversation about like, well, you know what, the Big Ten is better than the SEC. It's all bad. Like there are a few good teams, and most of it is trash.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah,
right?
I mean that's most years, but the idea of conference supremacy like doesn't go away. Like you, for the example, the Big Ten this year, like the Big Ten's got 2 teams on the same side of the division, like it usually does,
Correct.
that we think could potentially be college football playoff team.
Right.
And on the other side, Northwestern's got 4 losses and they just clinched their
Thank
spot
you,
in
and they
the Big
clinched
Ten title.
that division.
Yeah.
They're awful. Say, look at the Pac-12. Like right now, their best hope of making it to the playoffs is Washington State, right? Like that's it.
I'm going to throw our amazing team on Twitter for a little bit of a loop. I don't know if you guys can pull up the rankings, but from like 10 to 20 or 10 to 25, something outside of the top 10. If we can't pull it up, that's awesome. If not, either way, the conversation is still the same for me. When you look at those teams, I think realistically looking at a team that's 14 or 15 or 16 right now, That's not what being 14 or 15 or 16 was for years in our memory. I think there's a bigger drop-off than we're used to at those teams. And like you're seeing here, I'm not going to buy that Mississippi State in a lot of years would be a 21st overall team. I'm not looking at Northwestern and saying that's a top 25 team most years. We can't decide. Michigan State it was 18 last week.
But what does it say about the Big Ten that Northwestern's going to play for the Big Ten championship and they're ranked behind Mississippi State?
Yeah.
I mean,
and you look at this did you guys watch Boston College in a huge game for Boston College against Clemson? Did you watch Boston College and really walk away from that saying, "Oh, that's a top 20 team"?
No.
Well, I mean, but like Boston
I walked
College.
away saying the Patriots just found their next punt returner.
Yes, yeah, exactly. We did it. We scouted him out again from the people that brought you Braxton Berrios from Miami last
And for
year.
you guys listening on radio right now, 11 through 15 is on the Twitter page right now. UCF, Syracuse. We've already talked about those. Florida is the 13th best team in the country.
No.
Penn State, number 14. I'm not buying it. Like, fine. I'm forced to buy that they are the 13th and 14th best teams this year because there isn't a team I can look at and say they're vastly underrated. I just think that once you get out of the top 12, it's a whole bunch of meh.
You know who I want to stand up and pay attention to all of this that's going on right now and everything that we've just said here, because I think it's all right and I think it's all valid. Playoff expansion group. These are the other teams you want to throw into the lottery against the Bamas and Clemsons of the world? Like, I've been sitting up here saying, you don't want – the discussions we're having right now are great because it's Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, and then you've got Georgia and Oklahoma that we believe are teams that can get it done. Washington State with an interesting enough offense to make it wild, and then potentially Ohio State on the back end of that. And then you've got the teams after that. Like, do we really want to open it up? Everyone's like, we'll have all these same discussions, and they'll be watered down and worse because the teams will be watered down and worse.
So in the spirit of this open conversation, we just sort of flippantly passed over Syracuse. I do want to ask you, this weekend, the biggest game of the weekend, the pinstripe game, right?
Yeah.
How nervous? I mean, realistically, all biases aside, I don't know. All my Golic family things aside, how confident are you? Because this is it for Notre Dame. They win, they're going to go to the playoff.
Well, as I said, you get to go through USC, which is it's a rivalry game on the road, so you obviously can't undersell that one.
This is their test.
It's a banged up squad. Listen, Syracuse, the quick synopsis of them is high-powered offense, quarterback is a veteran guy. They've built it around this identity of going fast with Eric Dungy. On defense, they're boom or bust. They're going to give up 1,000,000 yards on defense, but they're also a defense that forces the second most turnovers on defense in college football. They're 9th in sacks. They've got 2 guys that are, I think, 9 or over in sacks. So they're boom or bust. Like, they're either going to get there and make a big play or they're not. So Notre Dame's ability to take care of the football and limit that's going to decide the outcome of that game. But Notre Dame is a pretty complete football team. Like, they're a really efficient pass defense. On offense, they've had opened up big plays in a way that hasn't been the MO in the past. So I think they're going to win this game, but Syracuse is absolutely scary for those reasons.
So now let me throw you, with that being said, a incredible what-if scenario inspired by Heather Dinich, one of the best, right? What if Notre Dame finishes 11-1? They lose this game. Quality loss. They finish 11-1. Ohio State wins the Big Ten, and Washington State goes in and obliterates their remaining schedule, which means Washington State only loss would be by 3 on the road against USC, team you just mentioned that they get a little credit for. How does that separate itself?
I think in that scenario, how Notre Dame loses to Syracuse would matter a lot in that, because Syracuse would jump a lot because of that win, and then how the committee ranks Notre Dame from there. Because in that scenario, Ohio State, we've said there's one thing you can't do in college football, and I've said it over and over again, you can't get blown out. And Ohio State did that one thing.
And then, of course, always the situation with Notre Dame is that they don't have a conference championship to play in, right? So they don't have anything to make up for it. So that would be essentially kind of the last. Well, they would, again, they'd have USC, but this would kind of be the last straw for them. Like, I don't see them still finding a way into the playoffs if they lose any of these games.
That'd be tough. That would be a really tough spot for them.
I don't see it.
Especially, I mean, when you throw Washington State, the only thing that could work out well for Notre Dame is if they finish with an emphatic win against USC and you have the common opponent for them. But Oklahoma scares the hell out of you at that point. Ohio State would. I still think Ohio State is a real uphill battle.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's look at a worst-case scenario that involves your favorite team.
Okay.
Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, and Georgia all win out. Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, Georgia all win out. Alabama finishes 12-1.
Yeah, so then I think Georgia is in. If Georgia wins the SEC championship, they are in the playoffs.
And so is Alabama out?
No.
So
They'll do the same thing they did
last.
They'll do the same thing they did last year. And again, I think it comes down to how you lose. But there's no way that a team that they had as the number 1 overall team, a historic record-setting offense, Alabama, could run the table, lose in the SEC championship, and not make it to the playoffs.
So our ESPN playoff predictor ran the numbers on it, and if that happened, Clemson, Notre Dame, Michigan, Georgia all went out. They give Clemson and Notre Dame, obviously, 100% chance of going to the playoff.
Wow.
Georgia, an 86% chance. But they give the edge, Michigan, 73%, Alabama, 30%. I find it hard to believe, but I'm going to look again at the eye test. But this is the one spot where Alabama's soft schedule does become a question, right? The fact that Alabama hasn't played as many teams, if they go out and lose in the SEC championship game, when they haven't played, they're playing the Citadel this week. Tough to get up for that one.
But this is, again, what we talked about before. The committee looks at these numbers and metrics and takes them into account. But we've already seen, like, when LSU only dropped from 3 to 7, that told us a lot about what people thought about Alabama there alone.
Yes. I mean, that's tough because who do you take that away from? Do you take
Michigan.
I
take it away from Michigan.
I was going to say this runs into the situation that we had all kind of hoped for, is that if Notre Dame was good and they could really turn this whole thing into chaos, because then you could, again, Michigan would just say to the committee, well, how are you going to take this away from us? If we run the table, that means that they win the Big Ten championship, right? So how can you take this away from us when we had to play another game and won? And Notre Dame didn't even have to play in a conference championship, and they didn't. So I think if it came down to that scenario, I think Notre Dame would be out, despite the fact that I think Notre Dame has probably the best resume out of Alabama or Georgia.
And I think that this is going to be the hairiest thing that could possibly happen for the committee this year. What happens when you have a Notre Dame team, if they go undefeated, and you have an undefeated team that loses its conference championship game? That's the toughest conversation you can have, because you're not getting the tick from a championship win. You're getting a demerit from an extra game loss that Notre Dame didn't even have to put themselves in that situation.
Let me try to put your bias aside. How would you feel if, what would be your argument against something like that? If that scenario played itself out and you're trying to pitch Notre Dame to the committee, what would be your pitch for them to stay in the top 4?
I think, again, looking at the teams they beat, when they beat them, I mean, you're penalizing what I look at Michigan's schedule comparatively, and I say the run of teams they beat, Michigan State, Penn State, and whatever happens in the middle there, those are all teams that could have ended up like Virginia Tech, Stanford for Notre Dame, where they beat those teams early enough and you had the season to see that they were subpar. We might not get to see it with those guys. And going undefeated still means something. Having a head-to-head win should still mean something. Because if that all goes south and an undefeated Notre Dame leaves, that could be the one place where we see real meaningful talk about a college football playoff expansion.
We're going to keep going on Twitter, but when we come back on radio, I'm going to counter Mike's point about college football playoff expansion, because there's one team that absolutely would benefit. We'll do that next. On Twitter, we're going to keep going, and you know what? I don't even know what this is. Sometimes you read something on the sheet.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's going to be. You just know it's going to be solid gold. That's just what you know. And all I know is the sheet tells me right now on Twitter that we're about to have a moment with Mike Leach. I don't know what that's going to be.
Oh, wow.
But I can tell you it says a moment with Mike Leach. Tossed to video. I cannot wait for every ounce of whatever this is.
It's a little mustache.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So that was Gardner Minshew, the quarterback for Washington State, who sports a pretty dope mustache.
Yeah. Can I say
putting
that
a fake mustache on Mike Leach?
He looks like a character from Boogie Nights.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, no.
I'm not going to say who he would be from Boogie
Yeah,
Nights.
no.
He could be a camera guy.
That is,
But, that is a... Yeah.
you know what?
That's the best mustache in college football, right?
Is it? Yeah, I mean, it has to be, right?
It's probably the only mustache on a front-facing player that we will truly acknowledge.
Yeah.
But
if you're just tuning in, hashtag rankings reaction to get in on the conversation. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, L. Duncan, our special guest host, and Ray says, I need a fake mustache. Ray, I'll take all the help I can get, because if 3 days growth, I'll get a little stubble.
Guys, picture this for me, because this is, to me, the perfect poster for how weird and wonderful Mike Leach is.
Yes.
A kid on his team felt like he could touch his coach's face.
Correct.
Like, could you dream of a world where you could go in and touch your boss's face like that?
And I wouldn't want to.
Like, I mean, we got like a couple, like our producers over here. Like, Fitz, would you walk over there realistically? Would you walk over there and put a mustache on anyone's face over there?
Yeah, but I feel like Fosse's different. Like a lot of times, you know, like the digital dudes are cool. They're like hip bosses.
Wow.
Come on.
Oh, okay. You're gonna touch his face.
Are you gonna,
This is
you're just
creepy.
gonna touch his face?
Just do it. It's fine.
I was like looking around for a mustache.
Are you giving him a soft little stroke? Oh, okay.
All right.
Now-
Too
now-
much. You crossed the line. You crossed the line.
Too much?
Too much. Just too much.
Oh,
Go back. Go sit down.
HR's getting a call.
Go sit down.
A little kiss on the forehead.
The police are outside. Sit down.
There's a line. There's a line for all of
The
them.
police are outside.
You know what? That's the sort of love we have around here.
No, listen, I get that. I was overcome. That was the first thing I
incredible.
thought when I saw the videos. He just touched his head coach's face.
Yeah.
I'm an adult now, by and large. I
Yeah.
guess
Mike Leach is all kinds of weird. I'm all in.
Like, I would never have touched Brian Kelly's face. Like,
I
I would
bet.
never have looked and been like, oh, that's a cool thing that we can do.
he doesn't
will
seem
give-
like that kind of guy.
Like,
We're just not face touchers, you know? That's not our relationship.
But I'll give Mike Leach a little bit of credit, or a lot of credit actually. I think that's become more and more and more. College football programs are sold by the identity of their coaches, and you decide as a kid deciding where you're going to play. Some people respond to the culture of Nick Saban. Some people respond to the culture of Dabo, and some people respond to.
I just
the
keep
culture
looking at that video. He looks like Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah, it's incredible. He really does.
Stick a mustache
he does.
He's a
Gonna
one,
put a
like
nose
he's a
on.
beautiful man. Like Mike Leach is my drug of choice.
Wow.
Honestly.
I'm
He's
so glad
incredible.
that I don't even know what to do with this. We're about to bring radio back in, and hopefully, for the love of God, that makes things a little better. I don't know what we're doing here.
I love it. Fast and loose.
Spain and Fitz is giving you the college football playoff rankings reaction show tonight. From 7 to 8 p.m., we've been getting you caught up, 8 to 9, whatever time we were on, until 9 o'clock.
Time is a flat circle, man. This show's already happened.
We're giving you all the. I'm still flustered because of things that Mike Golic Jr. just said that you should really go rewatch.
We do it for the Twitter show.
We do it for the Twitter show. Yeah. Hashtag rankings reaction to be a part of the Twitter conversation. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, L. Duncan hanging out on Mike Golic Jr.'s couch. And Sugar Sean comes in every week, every single week. And every week, he used to yell. He used to yell at me a lot about UCF. Sugar Sean has now come in to the point where, like, at least I think we have a friendship here. And so this one's for you, Sugar Sean, because Mike Golic Jr. just said, hey, when you look at the parity in college football, especially after number 10 or so, do you really want a playoff that includes all of them? Is it the worst thing, though, if it includes a team like UCF? Because if there's anything that we know out of a 14 playoff, I'm here to just tell you right now, loudly and proudly, in a 14 playoff, a team like UCF will never get in. The one opportunity that people use as an example of how they could get in was Houston a few years ago when they had some big games on the schedule. I consistently make the argument now, if I'm Wisconsin or Michigan or Penn State and I get a call from UCF and they're like, hey, you want to play? I'm like, nah, I want none of that. If I'm Alabama, I'm like, nah, I'm good. I don't need to play that. I got no win out of it. So I don't think they can load the schedule to get the big names they will need, and they'll never have the strength of schedule to compete. I don't love a college football world where there's an entire group of schools that have zero shot at a championship.
Maybe I'm wired differently because I think about it like this. L, when you watch the college basketball tournament, L. Duncan with us, when you watch the college basketball tournament in March, what do you watch for?
I watch for the underdogs, right?
You watch for the underdog. I feel like that's what this is driven by. And maybe I'm wired differently, but when I watch in the spring, I watch to see the thoroughbreds beat up on each other. The underdogs are fun in the beginning of the March Madness tournament.
Yeah.
And then we get to the end, and when one of them sticks around to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 and loses by 20 to the eventual national champion, I'm like, all right, we could have had a good team in there, but because you want this system that rewards arbitrariness and randomness, all of a sudden I get this crappy matchup later.
But I agree. But here's what I see what you're getting at. But I agree with it. It's fun to root for the underdog when you're talking about a group of 64. I don't care about the underdog in a group of 4 or even 10. Like when the numbers are smaller, I don't. Like, listen, no offense, UCF. I get it. I understand that it's cyclical for you guys. You can't get anyone to schedule you because you are good, and because you don't play anyone, you're never going to. I understand that. I understand your plight and how frustrating and devastating that might be. But if we give criticism to the Big 12 because it's a bunch of shootout teams that don't have any defense, you're the same team, only you're playing group of 5 schools. So, like,
you need to take several seats. I mean, it's just, I'm sorry. It's not going undefeated, winning 21 straight or whatever they've won. It's not all teams are created equal and not all conferences are created equal. And it just, that's the small and short of it. So, no, I would not root for a UCF if in a small sample size in the way that I would root for Sister Jean's Loyola Chicago in a group of 64.
By the way, Field Yates, ESPN superstar, has joined the broadcast. So feel free to hashtag rankings reaction. Let us know your top four. Because you got smart people watching. You might as well see if they want to contribute. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And Tom Luganville smartly pointed out to me that if you look at the last two group of 5 schools that then moved into Power 5 rankings, the 2 years combined leading up, they'd lost, I think it was 6 games. The 2 years after they made the move combined, they were each right at around 500. It shows you the difference between being the best school in the group of 5 versus a school in Power 5. Utah is one of those teams, and it's taken them this many years to get to where they are now, a relevant national conversation. There's a process that would have to happen. I just hate the thought of whether it's UCF this year or Memphis in a few years or whoever it is. I hate the thought of a group of people that don't, that have a zero shot at a championship. And even though in college basketball, I agree with all of you, there's not really the concept that everybody has a shot. We're still in a college championship world where Butler can take on Duke and come down to the end of the game. It can happen. There is at least that one smidgen of hope.
It
sure,
can.
I mean, the sports are so incredibly different.
Yeah,
sure,
that's the tough part.
You're right. You're right.
It's like comparing like apples to chicken wings. I mean, you can't. It's that.
Nobody wants apples over chicken wings, right?
No, 100%.
Okay, we're all chicken
wings. Well, I
mean,
if you're a vegetarian, then you're team apple, and that's the point. Like, if you're on one side of the coin, you think chicken wings are disgusting, and you're pro-vegan, and like that's animal abuse. Now, us normal people, I'm just kidding.
Forget that.
Yeah.
Elle just made that way heavier than that needed. I just meant as a general flavor.
Like as a chicken wing connoisseur.
So I want to look ahead
sports,
a little bit. Elle Duncan, Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, rankings, reaction, Spain and Fitz on the radio. I want to look ahead a little bit at Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the one school that in all of this conversation about could Georgia find their way in, even in our worst case scenarios, we've just concluded that Oklahoma is on the outside looking in. Are you guys both comfortable saying at this point that most scenarios leave Oklahoma out of the top 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Most, which, again, it's a shame. Like, you wish there was some semblance of defense. And quite frankly, the real shame of it all is the fact that they lost to a Texas team that we now see is pretty average in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the team that you gave it up to and ruined all of this, because Kyler Murray and that offense deserve to be involved in deserves a loaded word. That is a championship offense.
I love that you brought it there, because it is so interesting to me that a 3-point loss to Texas becomes something that, because if they didn't have that loss, if somehow they win that game by 1 point, they're in the top 4, right? Like, unquestionably.
I think they're in over Michigan.
Right. So we're not talking about their trash defense if they don't lose that one game. That one 3-point loss changes the entire conversation about their defense. The same way that a 29-point loss to Purdue changes the entire conversation for Ohio State. Like, it suddenly makes you quantify things differently. Are you willing to say, even though Michigan's loss was good, even though Michigan has the best loss on the resume, are we still just going to forgive the fact that by the eye test, Michigan hasn't looked as dominant at times as Oklahoma?
I think Michigan's looked dominant in the portion of the season since Notre Dame. They're
catching fire at the right time.
They've checked all the boxes that they need to do right now.
Yeah.
Offensively too, like, you can't find a lot of flaws in Michigan's resume. Like, this isn't bashing them for that, but it's just saying when you get beat head to head by a team, or if Oklahoma was undefeated, there would be a difference there. Like, I asked you guys both this: which unit would you trust more? I think we might have done this at the beginning. It's been an hour long of this. I can't forget, but which unit do you trust more if you had to put your life? I think you asked this: Oklahoma's offense or Michigan's defense?
Oklahoma's offense.
So now, which do you trust more: Michigan's offense or Oklahoma's defense?
Michigan's offense.
So and it's
That's
how
a really
close it's how close you decide those are, because again, the teams that are going to be able to have a shot at beating Bama, and that's the weapon we're trying to form here, are the teams that are closer to having a complete team as opposed to one dominant unit. And that's the only thing I worry about with Oklahoma, because we saw with LSU, dominant defense, we can negate that. Then what are you going to do?
I agree, because Mississippi State, I mean, for what it's worth, like, they gave the blueprint on kind of how to keep Tua extremely uncomfortable. Yep. You can call it was statistically his worst game of the season. I mean, I get it. It was still
a pretty decent day for Tua.
Yeah, still
by
better than like
comparison,
every
right?
other college
It's still better than
quarterback,
everybody else. With that being said, and again, I think that Mississippi State's more complete in terms of the fact that they do have some offensive ability. It didn't show up very much in that game. But again, like to me, they showed that if you have a really dominant front seven, then you can at the very least keep this thing tight enough. I think this is the lowest scoring game for Bama. You can keep the thing tight enough and try to give your offense a chance. And I think Michigan has a better chance of doing that than Oklahoma. They're going to give up 60 points to Alabama, and they're not going to score 60 points on the Alabama defense.
Neutral field, Michigan plays Oklahoma. Who do you have? Because I'm going to go the best player, and I think the best unit is Oklahoma's offense, and I think the best player is Kyler Murray. Neutral field, I'm going to take best player, best unit.
I'm still going to go with Michigan.
Man.
And I feel like more than ever, offense beats, like this whole mantra of like you win a championship with great defense. In college football and in the NFL this year, we're seeing this different world where, you know, every time the best offense seems to play the best defense, best offense kind of
against everything I just said, I'd have a hard time picking against Oklahoma. There's so much speed on that offense. And schematically, what Oklahoma does in Lincoln Riley's offense is just different than any other spread team, any other good college offense you're watching. They're on a different level.
I also want to give Travis, one of the producers that works on the radio show in general, a little credit for mentioning earlier. We don't know how close these votes are. Like, we don't see the final metrics, so we have no idea. We know that Michigan's number 4, right? And we know that Georgia's 5 and Oklahoma's 6. We just have no idea what really separates all of them. We have no idea if it's a couple of votes or if it's a bunch of votes. That's the part that I think the committee could afford to tell us, to help us. Thanks for so much for hanging out with us on radio. We're going to keep going on Twitter. Freddie and Fitzsimmons next on ESPN Radio. So on Twitter, I just went there. I just went Freddie and Fitzsimmons hanging out on ESPN Radio. On Twitter, Gojo, Backstreet Boys are on The Voice right now. Why is that to Gojo? Huh? I happen to love the Backstreet Boys.
Biggest Backstreet Boy fan like ever.
Well, I was going to say, it's been built into the model of the show. Like, it's just all these great things. Like,
so you guys were team
Nick
Backstreet
Carter
Boy
and I,
back in
like,
the day? You weren't
yeah.
team in sync?
Absolutely.
You weren't team in sync?
No.
Seriously?
I feel like that's a pretty par for the course argument here.
No, it is not at all.
Team
We
both.
can have this argument all day,
I'm team
Gojo.
both.
NSYNC had a
Well,
shirt.
you act like it wasn't even close. It's at the very least close. Are you joking?
Backstreet Boys have better songs.
Single-handedly gave Justin Timberlake, who was like one of the best
Justin
artists
Timberlake
of a
took what
generation.
was his. Justin Timberlake was dragging that group
Who
along.
from the Backstreet Boys was able to
They were
catapult themselves beyond the Backstreet
Okay,
Boys?
wait. But the Backstreet Boys.
Collectively, because none of them could sing.
Yeah, but to that
None
I
of
would
them
say
could
the
sing.
Backstreet
anyone
Boys.
outside of
NSYNC had
Justin Timberlake
JC
sing?
could sing. JC Shaz, where are we going?
JC Shots.
By the way, so I'm gonna give you my only
his full
thing.
name.
I went to high school with JC. I'm gonna
God.
give you my one JC-ism.
No.
Me and JC were talking at the back of the Grand Ole Opry the
Listen,
first
I got
time.
into
Oh,
Juilliard.
actually, there is a story about that, but that's for off air. But JC will always make me laugh that his name is Josh Chazet, and when he joined the Mickey Mouse Club, they already had another Josh, so they made him JC instead of Josh Chazet. That was the way they nicknamed him. And then everybody started calling him JC Chazet, which would make him Josh Chazet. It makes no sense to me.
I didn't know that about him.
There you go.
Fun fact, these are the things talked about in the halls of Juliana.
I'm sorry I have cool
JC.
friends. I mean, Nick Carter and I, though, we DM all the time on Twitter, so I don't, I'm on
Put it in your blog.
Nick Carter slides into your DM.
No, I
By the
slid
way,
into
while
him.
we're having the music discussion, and this is
I'm
still
trying to talk about college football.
it's still hashtag sports though. L as the representative of Atlanta. Super Bowl's down in Atlanta this year. How are we feeling about the halftime show?
We've had this conversation. I'm not happy about it. I mean, I'm not happy about it.
is that
She and
not
I on the
happy about it.
ESPN Music podcast, we went back and forth on this because I will say this: I don't love the policy, but it's always been the policy. They didn't do a Motown-themed Super Bowl halftime show when it was in Detroit. They didn't do a
But like I
country
tried to
theme
explain to
when it
Fitz
was in
when he
Houston.
said that, what I tried to explain to Fitz when he said that was, and Motown is like everything to me. I love Motown, but Motown is not relevant. Atlanta music is the most relevant music in the world right now. So it's not just about paying homage to a city. It's about the fact that this is what everyone's listening to. And you can miss me with your trying to pull the soccer moms in or whatever with Maroon 5. Like,
the soccer mom's kids are listening to Migos and 2 Chainz and Future and Young Thug and 21 Savage and all these people that are from Atlanta.
We'll continue this conversation off air because there's so much to say. Mike Foss,
Where's
I've been
the lie?
told that you have questions for us. I was
you're
just
a
told
soccer
to.
dad. How do you feel about Maroon 5?
I'm fine with them.
Right,
I'm totally fine with them. We'll get to questions in a minute. I was looking around here, though, and you need to explain something to me. I was looking at this.
Oh, God, don't put that on camera.
What is...
listen,
Oh, is that the grease? You keep the grease.
Yeah.
Michael,
Yeah, you
this
keep
is...
the grease.
No!
What? You keep the grease?
This is too
Yeah.
much grease.
cook
Yeah,
with it.
you keep it.
Are you... Mike, are you
Mike,
cooking with this?
wait. He
There's
just said you cook
mold.
with it. Open his fridge. Show the
Oh, is there
world.
mold in there
What are
now?
you cooking?
It's been there a while.
That's very southern in there.
I mean, what do you?
This is so sad, Mike.
What are you actually cooking? In
All
there
right,
with bacon
listen.
grease?
All right,
Your
before
Coors
you guys
Light.
start going in and judging my fridge.
Wow,
First
what
off,
an intrusion.
I party. First off, I party. So, you guys want a Coors latte?
Party.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
All right, I will concede this. I may have left that out there a little bit too.
Is that bacon grease?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you're telling me is the last time your mom came over and cooked here because you ain't cooking.
I
She
cook
left-
plenty when I'm not out of town 4 days a week. It's college football season, baby.
Wow. Speaking of college football season, any last words from anybody on L. Duncan? Any last words? Great, awesome. It's the hashtag Rankings Reaction Show, college football. Follow her on Twitter. It's at L. Duncan ESPN, right? At L. Duncan ESPN.
you got it.
At M. Golic Jr57. At
Stop
the
kitchen
Mike
shaming
Foss.
me.
I'm at Jason Fitz. Remember, we will be back on Tuesday. Thanks for watching the Rankings Reaction Show. We appreciate it.
NSYNC is greater than.
Boo. Bye, L.